Okay, next up we have Mihit. And Mihit is going to be speaking with us about how to detect diseases in tomato plants. Take it away, Mihit.
Well, thanks, Nishanti. So, hi. Sorry. One second.
Yeah, that's the right mode, Mihit. Yeah, we can see the slides and you can see the notes. Yes.
Yeah. All right. Hi, my name is Mihit, and today I will be presenting my AI model, Tomato Genius. So this project is focused on finding the best method in order to identify common diseases just by taking a look at the leaves of tomato plants. So in this presentation, I'll be telling you the steps that I took to make my model, which includes debugging and tools that I used. So this project was actually, Tomato Genius was actually used to learn about other different image classification models, such as random forest and K-hidden clustering. But this project specifically focuses on using different tools like TensorFlow and TensorBoard to get a greater depth of control over my model and a more understanding and learning. So my dataset consists of 1,500 images with 5 categories, and these 5 categories are made up of 4 different diseases, 1 healthy category. Each category has 300 images, where each image has a 256 by 256 dimensions. So in my project, what did I do? So I constructed and compared 3 different models. The first one was a neural network. The second model was a convolutional neural network. And the third one was a ResNet. So in my neural network, I had 65,000 input neurons, each neuron representing each pixel as an input. So the neural network would just compare each of these pixel values and generate output. There would be 5 output neurons for my 5 categories. So in my convolutional neural network, it contains a neural network, but on top of that, it contains what's called a convolutional layer. Now, the purpose of this convolutional layer is to extract features by looking at groups of pixels. Over here, we have a dummy image where the convolutional layers focuses on a 3 by 3 array and kind of zooms in, and it identifies features by multiplying it with this other 3 by 3 filter that it already has from its trained model. And it comes out with a sum, which is then passed on to the next layer for deeper layer feature extraction. Now, next we have the ResNet, which is a more refined CNN. So in CNNs, sometimes features can be skipped over and dumped off, even though they are very important. So this utilizes identity functions in order to either backtrack and repeat certain convolutional layers or to skip some convolutions. So in my tools and scripts, I used TensorFlow to construct my CNN and neural network. And for these 2 models, I used TensorBoard in order to look at different analytics. And I use AWS SageMaker provided by Navigator to construct my ResNet model. And I also made some Python scripts which allowed me to use TensorFlow and TensorBoard and also develop a confusion matrix comparison amongst these models. So now let's look at my initial models that I made. First, we have my neural network. Now over here, we see a confusion matrix where the y-axis is the actual value of the image and the x-axis is the predicted value. Keep in mind that when testing my models, I used a separate 1,500 image testing data set, and this is what you will see in the confusion matrix for this model and the other ones. Over here, we just see that my model has just predicted healthy as all of them. And when I looked into TensorBoard and looked at some of the analytics, you see here that I observed the fact that my model was actually not learning. And how did I find this out? Over here on the right, over here, we have these graphs which represent the neural network activity. Now, I had 18 layers in my model, and on the left, until the 8th layer in my model, we see we have these nice fluctuating graphs, which shows that my model is actually learning for each image or piece of data that has been passed through. And after the 8th layer, I kept on noticing a pattern between these graphs where there would just be a sudden spike of activity. It would just die down. This basically shows that my model is not exactly learning and it's just changing for whenever there's a certain category of data that's passed through in case of this, which is healthy. So in conclusion, my initial model for MLP was not working due to the fact it wasn't learning. My CNN also had a similar problem, except this time it was confusing the disease septoria and predicting that randomly. Over here, we also notice a much worse learning curve over here with the convolutional layer and the neural network layer. Now, my CNN had 5 convolutional layers, which means the feature extraction process would occur 5 different times. And also, I had a very small amount of neural network layers. Now, the main gist of the problem is that they are all not learning, and keep that in mind for when I explain my changes. My resident, when I first made it, it was actually working pretty great. It had an 80%, 87% accuracy, and if you can see here, majority of my testing data set, the samples were contained within this diagonal, which shows that the correct images were predicted correctly. Now, I couldn't really change anything to improve the accuracy, so I won't be talking about the resonant further on in this presentation. Now, we talked about for the neural network and CNN how they are not learning, and I took 2 different approaches when fixing them. In my MLP, I told you how starting from the 8th layer and afterwards, the neural network layers weren't learning that much. So I started to decrease my layers, and over here we have a graph which shows the accuracy and correlation with the number of layers in my neural network. And you see here at the 7th layer, it has the highest accuracy of 60%. Now, this is a major improvement from the random 20% accuracy that I had earlier. I tried making other changes to like the activation layer and the optimizer, but they didn't really change my accuracy that much, so I just stuck with the 60%. But in my CNN, I decreased the number of convolutional layers similar to the neural network. So if there are more convolutional layers, there will be some amount of features extracted in the first layer, and in the next layer, out of those features, only a couple more will be extracted, and so on as each layer progresses. Now for my CNN, I decreased the number of layers as to provide more data into my neural network for it to analyze. So I shortened it from 5 convolutional layers to 2 convolutional layers, and to accommodate the increase in the number of features being passed on, I also increased the number of layers in the neural network for increased processing. Now, in my result, we talked about how the MLP had a 60%, but in my CNN, it had a well-performed 91% accuracy over my 1500 image training set. Now, over here in my confusion matrix, we see that the section, the mosaic, the healthy leaves, blight, and curl disease were actually not miscalculated at all and were all predicted correctly. Now we see the mosaic and septoria diseases as predicted incorrectly. This is possibly due to some data problems where like some of the images are very close in resemblance, and that could just be fixed with some manual tweaking. But overall, I'm pretty happy with how it performed. Now, what did I learn? So some of my key takeaways from this whole experiment was just basically using different AI models, understanding how they learn, and how to use their pros and cons to fix my problems. And along with this, I developed a systematic method to identify different problems, such as my models that are not learning, and fix it. Overall, this is just an experience as I'm not a pro in AI and I just need to gather more information and learn more. And this is just another step towards that. So as of my future plans, so Tomato Genius right now is being made into an app where farmers will be able to take pictures of crops and have diseases and see whether there are diseases or not. The goal of this is to just increase automation. It's not definitely to be better than people looking at leaves and identifying diseases. So this app will also be expanded to other popular crops and not just tomatoes, such as grapes and wheat. Thank you for listening to my presentation.
Thank you, Mihit. I really like that you tried out a bunch of different, neural networks. And so, and experimented with them. So if anybody has any questions, please put them on the chat. So I did have one question, which is, do you think that this idea could be used, maybe not the actual network, but the overall idea could be used to, for example, do something like detect diseased fruit, not just plants? Do you think?
Yeah, overall, it's just for image, it's just finding diseases using image recognition. And it can be used in a variety of fields, especially in agriculture. I just use these because they were the most abundant data set. But if I had the chance, I would also implement it on other agricultural purposes.
Very cool. Thank you very much, Mihit.